I am your host every Saturday at 10 a.m. previewing the SEC football slate of the day. And I'm going to get you right with any of your betting picks that you may want to make going into the SEC games of the day. I am live from 312 Pizza Company in Germantown, just as I am every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. So I appreciate 312 Pizza Company for having me every Saturday. And it's one of my favorite places to go in Germantown. I absolutely love their pizza. I'm from St. Louis and it's Chicago style pizza. So, if I like it, that it's really, really good. So make sure if you want a place to watch the game tonight, make sure to come out to 312 Pizza Company. They have great food. They have a bunch of local beers on tap. So if you want to come hang out, if you want to watch some of the games of the day, come through and do it at 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. I appreciate them very much for having me every week. But we've got a small but mighty slate of games today. Only 4 SEC games this week. We've got a bunch of teams on a bye, but we're good. We're getting into the nitty-gritty, and we have a couple kind of tricky games. So I'm going to help you navigate the slate of the day. First and foremost, probably the least anticipated game of the day, Missouri Vanderbilt. So this is going to be kind of a gross game. And I feel like I say that every week about whoever Vanderbilt plays, because Vanderbilt's just kind of gross, but they just cannot score points. Vanderbilt cannot seem to get anything moving on offense. It's dead last in the nation. They're averaging just 13.2 points per game. Vanderbilt has yet to score more than 20 points in any SEC game. They've scored 6 or fewer in 3 of their 4 SEC games so far. They have yet to get an SEC win on their schedule. Vanderbilt in the rebuilding year, Clark Lee in his first year. It doesn't seem like Vanderbilt's going to turn anything around anytime soon. But if they were to do that, if they were to get an SEC win on their docket, it would be against Missouri, because Missouri, their defense can't even stop a nosebleed. Missouri's defense is porous. It's bad. They're dead last in the SEC in total defense, second to last in the nation against the run. They're allowing teams to hit close to 50% of their third down chances. Missouri just can't seem to get any stops against any sort of offense. They've allowed 275 yards or more on just the ground. If 275 yards or more rushing in 5 of their last 6 games. North Texas is the only team in their last 6 games that didn't get 275 yards or more on the ground, but Missouri allowed more than 300 passing yards against North Texas. And I have to think that Vanderbilt is at least a little bit more of a threat to this Missouri defense than North Texas. But I am going
for the spread there, but I don't think that
they are going to be able to make up for a 16-point deficit. Sorry about that little audio issue there going on. But moving on to my most anticipated game of one of the most anticipated games of the year, I would say every year, but definitely my most anticipated game this week. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party taking place to a neutral site in Jacksonville, Florida, against the top team in the country in Georgia. So this very well could be the toughest test for this Georgia secondary so far this year. I thought Georgia's biggest test in the year was going to come in week 1 against Clemson. And it kind of seemed like they had. I mean, they only won by a touchdown. They only put up 10 points. But I think that what we've seen from Clemson so far this season, I think we've learned, okay, we thought it was going to be a bigger test than it actually was. DJ Uiagalelei getting benched. He's not the passing threat that we thought that he was going to be. But I think that this Georgia secondary is going to be tested more this week than they ever have. Will Levis threw for almost 200 yards Auburn was able to throw over 200, about 215 yards on them. But I think that Florida can get things moving a little bit more here as well. It's not going to be any sort of Matt Corral, deep ball, deep threat, air it out type of threat. But I think that Florida is just as much of a threat in the air as they are on the ground. Now, Florida could win this game. They could at least cover. The spread here is 14.5, which is a tricky spread. So Florida could win. Florida could cover. They're coming off of a bye. They're well rested after a tough loss to an LSU team that I think played their best football all season. I think that we learned last week, LSU Ole Miss, that LSU is more so what they showed us at the beginning of the season and not necessarily snagging a win in the swamp against Florida. I mean, they played their best football against Florida. Florida made a ton of costly mistakes. LSU was able to capitalize on them. LSU was able to run all over that Florida defense. So I think that Florida comes back well rested after a bye week, after a good week of practice, and they're going to be angry. And they're going to want to get a win. They're not going to want to get 2 back-to-back losses. So I think that Florida could have the mental edge here. Plus, Georgia's quarterback situation is a little bit up in the air. We've heard that JT Daniels may be well rested, maybe 100% for this game. But so far, what I have heard, nothing confirmed yet, that Stetson Bennett has been named the starter today. He's been great so far, but he hasn't been overly pressured. They've relied a lot on the run game with him. So if Florida's able to stop the run, if they put pressure on Stetson Bennett, if he ends up being the starter today, I think that they're going to be able to force him to throw, and he doesn't like to throw under pressure. Remember the Alabama game last year? Stetson Bennett seemed lights out all season, and then Alabama defense started to pressure him a little bit, and he had his first multiple interception game against Alabama last year. So if Florida's able to stop the run, and they put pressure on Stetson Bennett, I think that Florida could force him to make some costly mistakes. But knowing that JT Daniels could be healthy enough to play in this game, I think could throw a wrench in things. Now, I think that's how Florida could cover. I think that's how Florida could win. But I think Georgia will win. And I think Georgia will cover. That 14.5, that half hook there is going to be difficult. But Florida makes some serious mistakes. They're not a very disciplined team. They've had several costly turnovers against LSU, 2 or 3 pick sixes off the top of my head. They have a ton of talent. They played Alabama close, but so did Tennessee. Tennessee played Alabama close for 3 quarters. So I think that whenever people pick Florida to win, pick Florida to cover, they always defer that Alabama game. Well, they played Alabama close. Well, we've learned that Alabama has plenty of holes this year. I mean, they lost to Texas A&M. Tennessee was only down by 7 in the 4th quarter. Florida played them close. So this Alabama team isn't the blow every single other opponent out of the water. So I see that Florida has a lot of talent, but I think that they also make a ton of mistakes. Georgia just has to do 3 things that they do best to win and to cover this game. They need to rely on the run the ball, run up and down the field. They need to rely on their defense. Keep your defense on the field as long as you possibly can. Make a ton of Florida stops and gas this Florida offense out, because the defense can hold up. And I don't know how long this Florida offense can hold up against Georgia's defense. And then just don't make big mistakes, which Georgia really hasn't this year. They haven't been turning the football over. They haven't been committing a ton of penalties. I mean, whoever wins the turnover battle wins here. Georgia does not turn the ball over a lot. Florida can get sloppy, especially if they get pressured, if they get tired. So I think that Georgia wins it here because Florida will continue to commit a ton of penalties, and Georgia's defense is incredibly difficult to score on. Now, one caveat here as well. We mentioned the Georgia quarterback debacle. There's a little bit of a Florida quarterback debacle. I think that Anthony Richardson does get the start here. I don't think that Emory Jones is a good enough quarterback to win this game. And I think that Dan Mullen knows that. So I think that if Anthony Richardson gets the start, could be a little bit closer than anticipated. But I still think that Georgia gets it done and they get it done big. Now, this next game, again, Caroline Fenton, Southeastern, Caroline's live from 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. Make sure to check out 312 Pizza if you haven't already. It's one of my favorite pizza places in the city, so make sure to come out, watch the games here, grab a beer, grab a pizza. It's a really fun place to hang out. But this next game, Ole Miss, Auburn, number 10, Ole Miss at 18, Auburn. This kind of feels like the SEC West runner-up bowl. I mean, if Alabama gets one more loss on their schedule, Ole Miss or Auburn could easily swoop in and take the SEC West crown, and it depends on this game. Auburn is favored -3. It's just a home favor. It's really a pick 'em. I think Vegas is seeing this as a pick 'em game and just giving Auburn the home edge here. Bo Nix has been slinging it. Bo Nix has been playing the best football of his career in the past few games. Ever since he up benched in the Georgia State game, he has been lights out. He took care of Arkansas, no problem. He passed for 2 touchdowns, 292 yards on 26 attempts. Also got it done on the ground. He had a touchdown rushing with 42 yards rushing. Had a great game against Arkansas. And a nice 71-yard touchdown pass to Demetrius Robertson in the third quarter. Bo Nix is doing impressive things. Now, in this matchup, this historical matchup, Auburn has won 6 of the last 7 games at home against Ole Miss. They're 14-3 in their last 17 games at Jordan Hare. I think that being at home gives Auburn a huge advantage, especially because we've seen Bo Nix get slipped up on the road. The only interceptions that he threw in 2020, all but one, were on the road. So we know that he does give them the advantage. New Ole Miss team has been so much better than anything that we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years from Ole Miss. So I see that historical matchup, and I raise you, Matt Corral. He's a Heisman frontrunner right now. Ole Miss looks great in the last 3 quarters of the game against LSU, but that first quarter gave them a ton of issues. I mean, Ole Miss racked up 91 yards of penalties against LSU. They were still able to get a huge win, 31-17, but it felt worse than that. But LSU is not a good team. Auburn is a much better team than LSU. So if Ole Miss continues to commit those false starts, pass interference, any of those dumb penalties and rack up a ton of yards like they did against LSU, then they're going to lose this game. So Ole Miss needs to be disciplined in this game. Matt Corral needs to air it out. Ole Miss just needs to do what they do best, relying on their offense, put up big numbers on offense, at least try to get a few stops against Auburn, at least try and keep their offense below 250 yards. And I think Ole Miss gets it done big here. So I'm going to take Ole Miss on the money line. That's your best value here. Ole Miss on the money line plus 125. Final game of the day, fourth and final game, SEC game at least, number 12, Kentucky, going in to Davis Wade Stadium and taking on Mike Leach and the Mississippi State Bulldogs. So last week, Mississippi State blew Vanderbilt outgained them by almost 400 yards, beat them 45-6. Will Rogers, Mississippi State's quarterback, finished with 4 passing touchdowns, 384 yards passing on 57 attempts. I mean, Mississippi State's offense just had a field day. It was against a Vanderbilt team that's not very good. So I'm not going to put a ton of stock into that, but we've seen Mississippi State do a lot of really great things on offense so far this year. And on the other side, Kentucky is coming off of a 30-13 loss to Georgia before their bye. And that may seem embarrassing, but everyone's getting blown out by Georgia. So I see that. And I also don't put a ton of stock in that because I feel like any good football team is going to lose to Georgia. Their offense is going to look bad against this Georgia defense. I mean, props to them for even putting up 13 points against Georgia. They're giving up just 19.5 points per game. Should be a tough test for a very pass-happy Mississippi State team. But I think that Mississippi State gets the win here. They're currently favored by 2, not a huge spread there. It's at Davis Wade. It's at home. It's at Starkville. I think that Kentucky can be a little bit rattled. They could have a little bit of a hangover coming off of that loss against Georgia. Now, they have a bye week. They were able to get rested, have some good weeks of practice put in there. But I don't think that this Kentucky team is really used to having a lot of success. So I think getting knocked down by Georgia may knock them down even more. I mean, Kentucky's going to rely on the running game a lot here. They have all season. Chris Rodriguez, he's got 775 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground this season. Mississippi State can stop that run. They're going to force Will Levis to throw. But Mississippi State hasn't allowed more than 200 yards on the ground all season. So I think that they can get this run stopped. And forcing Will Levis to throw isn't necessarily a bad thing for Kentucky. He's completing about 68% of his passes. He's got about 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns in the air with just 6 interceptions. I mean, Will Levis can get it done. I just don't think that Kentucky can rely fully on the passing game. They're coming off of a loss to Georgia 2 weeks ago. I mean, emotional hangovers are a real thing. But I think there's one caveat here that could push Kentucky to a victory is that they're playing for something. Mississippi State isn't really playing for anything. They're not going to win an SEC West title. They're going to go to a bowl game. I guess that's really what they're playing for here, but it's not like we're going to see any sort of playoff run from Mississippi State. They're not competing for the SEC West. They're not going to be in Atlanta for the SEC championship at the end of the season. But Kentucky is still playing for something. Now, they got beat by Georgia. Anything could happen with the rest of the season. Doesn't seem like anyone else is going to take the crown in the SEC West, or SEC East, excuse me. But Kentucky only has one loss on the season, and that is to Georgia. So they still could be playoff hopefuls. I'm not putting them in my top four, but I think that they still view the rest of their season as, if we can win out, if we can get some solid wins, if we can put up some serious numbers, then maybe we could get noticed by the College Football Playoff Committee. So I think that Kentucky playing for something here is going to give them the motivation that they need if they are going to beat Mississippi State. I just think Mississippi State, I mean, they're so unpredictable, and I could totally see them getting a win here at home against Kentucky. So a quick little recap. Mizzou, Vanderbilt, give me Mizzou to win, but Vandy plus 16. I mean, this Missouri defense is one of the worst in the SEC, and one of the worst in the country. So I think Vanderbilt, if they're going to put up more than 20 points against an SEC opponent for the first time this season, Missouri is going to be the opponent to do that. I think Missouri gets the win because they have the better offense here, but they have just such a bad defense. I don't think that they're going to be able to close a 16-point gap. Florida, Georgia, world's largest cocktail party in Jacksonville. I think that Florida covers the spread minus 14.5. That's a tricky little hook there. But I do think that Florida isn't able to make up for any sort of point deficit here. Ole Miss at Auburn, number 10 Ole Miss, number 18 Auburn, kind of competing for the SEC West runner-up here. I am going to take Ole Miss on the money line, plus 125. Auburn is favored in this game, but I think it's just being at home, being at Auburn Stadium gives them the edge here. But I think Ole Miss gets it done. And I think Matt Corral knows, hey, the more numbers I put up, the more impressive performances I have against top 25 opponents makes my odds at the Heisman that much higher. Number 12, Kentucky at Mississippi State. Kentucky only has one loss in the season, and I kind of feel like Mississippi State may give them their second loss of the season. Mississippi State is great against the run, and I think that Mississippi State shuts down Kentucky's run here, and Kentucky isn't quite able to make up for it. That is going to do it for me today. Again, I'm Caroline Fenton. I'll be here every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. previewing the slate of SEC games for the day. You can also catch me from 2 to 6, Monday through Friday on Stillman & Company on ESPN 102.5 The Game. I am live from 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. I seriously love this place. It's a great place to hang out, great place to grab pizza. Pizza's not your thing. They've got plenty of other things on the menu that are great as well. Come out to 312 Pizza Company, watch some games, watch your team, and maybe make some money on the games today on the SEC slate of the day. I will see y'all